The only thing worse than waking up at 3 in the morning, having to go take a leak, and the second you get out of that bed, you stub your toe, would be avoiding these 5 wide receivers who I believe could break fantasy football in 2025. These are 5 wide receivers that I believe have league-winning upside in 2025, and that you guys should be looking to draft come August or early September when you do your fantasy football drafts. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure you leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get into 5 wide receivers who could break fantasy football in 2025. We begin with the first wide receiver of today's video, and that is going to be Brian Thomas Jr. of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Current sleeper ADP wide receiver 8 at pick number 12, meaning that if you are in a 12-team league, he is currently coming off the board as the last pick inside of the first round. Now, despite the fact that the Jacksonville Jaguars were a disaster of an organization last season, we saw Trevor Lawrence end up going down and missing 7 games, meaning in those 7 games, the starting quarterback was Mac Jones. And while Mac Jones isn't necessarily the worst backup quarterback in the NFL, there is definitely a very big drop-off when you compare Trevor Lawrence's quarterback ability to Mac Jones. And you also had the coaching situation that was just a complete and utter unmitigated disaster last season. We saw the coaching change in the offseason. Liam Cohen is now the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So despite the fact that Brian Thomas Jr.'s quarterback ended up getting hurt, and despite the fact that the whole team as a whole was just not functioning right, like it seemed like there was something off game in and game out, and despite all of that, Brian Thomas Jr. was the wide receiver 4 in PPR and the wide receiver 12 in terms of PPR points per game. So 7 games without Trevor Lawrence, 17 total games for BTJ in his rookie season. He ranked 14th in targets. He had 133 targets, 7.8 per game. He ranked 12th in receptions, 87 receptions, 5.1 per game, 1,282 receiving yards, 75.4 per game, 3rd at wide receiver, and he had 10 total touchdowns, 5th at the wide receiver position. So despite the fact that he only saw the 14th highest amount of targets, he was still able to finish top 5 in receiving yards as well as in total touchdowns. And again, in 7 of those games, Trevor Lawrence wasn't even playing. He was putting up these numbers with the 50th highest target accuracy at the wide receiver position. He was 8th in yards per route run, 15th in yards per target, 9th in yards per team pass attempt, and 2nd in dominator rating. Now, I fully understand that this is a team that ended up drafting Travis Hunter, and that is going to scare a lot of people away. They're going to see the name Travis Hunter. They're going to see the fact that they brought in the Heisman. They're going to see the fact that Travis Hunter has all of this pizzazz, and rightfully so, right? Travis Hunter deserves the metaphorical Gawk Gawk 9000. He deserves to be picked where he was picked in the 2025 NFL draft because he is very, very, very good, right? I'm not here to discount the player that Travis Hunter is, but when you put into an understanding of this situation as a whole, it is very clear that Brian Thomas Jr. is still the wide receiver 1 in this offense. He is still the number 1 look, and just because they added Travis Hunter doesn't mean that Brian Thomas Jr.'s value has been flushed down the toilet. Evan Ingram ends up getting cut. Where's Evan Ingram now? He's in Denver with Bo Nix. Christian Kirk gets traded from the Jacksonville Jaguars to the Houston Texans to potentially be the number 2 wide receiver on the Texans behind Mr. Nico Cousin, Let's Go Bowling Collins. So they don't have Evan Ingram, who is, in my opinion, at minimum, a top 8, top 10 tight end in the NFL. Say what you want about his dropping issues back with the Giants. He was a valuable piece of this Jaguars offense. Christian Kirk, say what you want about him. The guy can't stay healthy, blah, 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 blah. That is a talented wide receiver too. So now there's no Evan Ingram and no Christian Kirk. Sure, they add in Travis Hunter, but I don't think that's going to end up being the reason why Brian Thomas Jr. is sleeping with the fishes like his name is Luca Brasi. Frankly, I believe in Brian Thomas Jr. very heavily. This was a guy that I was banging the drum for last season, talking him up when he was going deep into drafts. He was going deep later on in drafts. Sure, now he's a first-round pick. People are going to panic. You should still feel very confident in Brian Thomas Jr. because his upside, I get that I'm not the biggest Trevor Lawrence fan, but under this Liam Cohen offense, I really do believe that the upside for Brian Thomas Jr. is the wide receiver #1 in fantasy football. Travis Hunter is going to do his thing. He's going to be a fun player to watch, but Brian Thomas Jr. is still that guy in this offense, and you should still believe that he could finish as the wide receiver 1. At number 2, we move to a much more divisive player. I don't know why I always say decisive instead of divisive. A more divisive player, right? We just talked about Brian Thomas Jr., who absolutely smashed his rookie season. And then we got a guy now who was an absolute dud in his rookie season. And just based upon saying that, you already know who I'm about to talk about. That is Maserati Marvin Harrison Jr. of the Arizona Cardinals. Sleeper ADP wide receiver 18 at pick 36, the 3.12. Now, I will be the first to admit that maybe I got very overzealous last season with my ranking of Marvin Harrison Jr. I was giving him the metaphorical gawk 9,000 special all summer long. This was a guy that I believed should have been a first-round pick in fantasy football drafts. The guy's tape at Ohio State was absolutely beautiful, right? It was a sight to behold, like the first time you saw a rack in person, right? Marvin Harrison Jr. was a guy in college that was dominant, and I believe that he lived up to the name, right? Marvin Harrison, that's a great name that you're going to have to live up to, and I said, you know what? He's going to be just as good as his father. Maybe he will be even better, and then if you drafted Marvin Harrison Jr., that's a guy that left you out to dry. It was a disaster of large magnitude. He was the wide receiver 44 in PPR points per game and the wide receiver 30 in PPR. He played every game last season. He had 116 targets, 6.8 per game, number 20 at wide receiver, 62 receptions, 3.6 per game, number 37 at wide receiver, 885 receiving yards, 52.1 per game, 30th at wide receiver, and 8 total touchdowns, 13th at wide receiver. So his saving grace in some games was that he found the end zone and you were okay with him. For me, it was very hard to bench Marvin Harrison Jr. last season because of the fact that I felt like he was just going to blow eventually, metaphorically, right? He was going to eventually have that Krakatoa, that huge, momentous game. He was going to pop off and he was going to get consistency. We saw the pop-offs, we just didn't really see any consistency. He was 15th in dominator rating, 92nd in target accuracy. Now, I am one of the biggest believers in one of the shortest guys in the NFL, and that's Kyler Murray. I'm a huge believer in Kyler Murray. I believe Kyler Murray has the ability to feed Marvin Harrison Jr. He has the ability to make Marvin Harrison Jr. into a potential top 12, top 8, top 5 wide receiver in fantasy football. All it is going to take is for him to trust Marvin Harrison Jr. more, for him to just feed the rock down the throat of Marvin Harrison Jr. Sure, they have Trey McBride, they have James Conner, but when you look at this wide receiver room, it is very evident that they didn't make any changes to this wide receiver core that is going to dethrone Marvin Harrison Jr. They have Greg Dortch, they have Michael Wilson, they have Zay Jones, they have Simi Fehoko, they have Xavier Weaver, right? They have Quez fucking Watkins, right? Outside of Marvin Harrison Jr., there isn't very much talent at this wide receiver room, and it is very evident that Marvin Harrison Jr. is the best wide receiver on this team. Now, I fully understand that Marvin Harrison Jr. ended up bending you over last season without the use of any lube. If you drafted Marvin Harrison Jr., you were walking funny for about the next 6 months, right? You still might not have recovered from the absolute demolishment of your asshole that Marvin Harrison Jr. gave you. But this season, I truly believe that the bounce back is coming. I believe so heavily in the talent of Marvin Harrison Jr. that I'm willing to get up to bat and swing for the fences again with Marvin Harrison Jr. You're getting him at a much bigger discount this season, and in a lot of leagues, he might fall into the 4th round because people got burned by him last season. So I believe the upside is there. Does it feel super duper safe clicking on Marvin Harrison Jr.'s name when you go to draft him in your fantasy football league? Fuck no, baby. But the upside is still very much there from last season. I believe Marvin Harrison Jr. is clearly the best wide receiver in this offense. I believe that Kyler Murray can elevate Marvin Harrison Jr. So you might want to just, plunge your nose, cover your nose and dive on in and draft Marvin Harrison Jr. this season, because the upside, in my opinion, is still just as high as last season. Next up, we move to DK Metcalf, wide receiver of the Pittsburgh Steelers, sleeper ADP wide receiver 23 at pick number 50, the 5.2, so the second pick inside the 5th round of 12-team leagues right now. Now, DK Metcalf is a guy that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, but I really do believe that with Aaron Rodgers now signing with the team, we could be a lot more definitive with this take, right? I said I was very confident in DK Metcalf because I really strongly believed that Aaron Rodgers was going to sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was going to be the quarterback one on the team. Not everyone was so confident in that, but now Aaron Rodgers is there, right? It is definitive. Aaron Rodgers is the starting quarterback on this team, so I believe I need to double down on this take and just talk about it some more. Now, there are going to be a lot of people in the comment sections that, for one, don't believe in Aaron Rodgers. For two, don't believe in DK Metcalf at all. And for three, they fucking hate Arthur Smith. I believe in the third thing. I hate Arthur Smith, but I do not agree at all with Aaron Rodgers being a complete and utter bum and with DK Metcalf being a bum. Now, I am someone for years that faded DK Metcalf. Nick, why did you do that? It's not because I thought DK Metcalf was a bad wide receiver, because you could see the upside of DK Metcalf. He's another guy that flashes on the screen. You can see the humongous upside game in and game out. This is a guy that's built like a Greek god. This is a guy with the speed of Usain Bolt, but he was never really able to put up a super consistent season because of the fact that there were other wide receiver threats around him. This is a guy that has been surrounded by guys like Jackson Smith-Njigba as well as Tyler Lockett, and whether you like Tyler Lockett or JSN or not, those are fierce competitions in the wide receiver room. It's not like where he has right now. When you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver depth chart, you've got Robert Woods in 2025. Now, I used to be a Robert Woods truther. I used to love Bobby Trees back when he was on the LA Rams, him and Cooper Kupp, the dynamic duo. And you know what? Some of you guys might have liked Robert Woods back then as well. But it is 2025, and his biggest competition for Metcalf is Robert Woods, Calvin Austin, Scotty Miller, Ben Skoranek, Roman Wilson, right? There isn't this crazy depth at the wide receiver position here with the Pittsburgh Steelers. There's no George Pickens because he's in Jerry's world with the Dallas Cowboys. So even if you were someone that avoided DK Metcalf in the past like myself, you have to fully acknowledge that this is a wide receiver room that is heavily depleted. They have to throw the ball somewhere, and Aaron Rodgers is the type of quarterback that can close his eyes and lock into a target. He's the kind of guy that could force feed the rock to DK Metcalf game in and game out. Nick, Aaron Rodgers wasn't all that good last season. Look, I'm going to call a spade a spade. Was Aaron Rodgers the same Mr. Discount double check the State Farm man that he was a couple of years ago? Of course he wasn't. Was he even looking like, maybe that guy would come out? Sure, in some games you were like, holy shit, Aaron Rodgers is back. Aaron Rodgers makes these crazy throws, like that crazy touchdown pass. I believe it was up against the Bills where he threw the ball 7 gazillion yards and Alan Lazard comes down with it. It's like Aaron Rodgers is back, right? We did see the peak of what Aaron Rodgers could be. We saw some low lows as well, like up in, I forgot who they played. It was the Vikings, and I just don't remember where the game was. Maybe it was in Germany. I think it was in England, but that was a really bad game out of Aaron Rodgers. So I don't think we're going to see the Aaron Rodgers of old, but this is a fine quarterback situation for DK Metcalf, right? It's not like it's going to be Tommy DeVito throwing him the football or Kenny Pickett or some shit, right? Aaron Rodgers is still a fine quarterback. And we saw Aaron Rodgers laser eyes onto Garrett Wilson early on last season. And then towards the end of the season, once they got Devontae Adams from the Las Vegas Raiders, we did end up seeing the same exact thing for Devontae Adams. So DK Metcalf's a guy that is going to be given all of the opportunity opportunity in the world to succeed. Last season in Seattle, wide receiver 32 in PPR, 33 in points per game. I told you not to draft him, and guess what? You were a genius if you didn't draft him. But right now, as the wide receiver 23 off the board, you're not even having to draft him inside the top 18, the top 20. He's not even close to being ranked as a top 12 wide receiver right now. This is the time to pounce on DK Metcalf. I'll read off his stats last year: 108 targets, 66 receptions, 992 receiving yards, 5 total touchdowns. He was 10th in explosive rating, 24th yards per target, 16th in yards per reception. I believe in the upside that is DK Metcalf. I believe that he is the clear alpha wide receiver on this team. There is no reason to even doubt that. Again, say what you want about Aaron Rodgers, but DK Metcalf is that guy, and I think this is the perfect situation, the recipe of sugar, spice, and everything nice for Metcalf to have his best season yet in the National Football League. Next up, we move to rookie wide receiver Tetairoa McMillan. Tetairoa McMillan, Tet McMillan, because I don't feel like reading off that, and plus his full name, frankly, just don't fit on the screen, of the Carolina Panthers, sleeper ADP wide receiver 33 at pick 67 right now off of the board. But before we talk about Tet McMillan and the 5th wide receiver in today's video, I would like to give you guys a quick word for our friends, our sponsor over at Underdog. Underdog has a great offer for new users today. If you sign up using promo code Notorious or by clicking on the link in the video description as a new user, you will receive a gimme free pick, a new customer pick, which is going to be Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, higher than half of a total point, plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. If you guys would like to check out Underdog Fantasy, please make sure that you use promo code Notorious to make sure that you get that gimme pick plus the deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Underdog also has great draft games. I love to do my best ball drafts on there for fantasy football. Best Ball Mania, the biggest tournament in fantasy football. $15 million in total prizes, $25 to enter, $2 million to first place, $1 million to second place. Make sure you guys do check that out. The best part about fantasy football is the draft, and that's all you have to do on Underdog. Your lineup will be set by them at the end of every single week with the highest scores. So make sure you guys check it out, promo code Notorious, or by clicking on the link in the video description. Back on into things, we got Tet McMillan of the Carolina Panthers. Now, if you don't know who Tet McMillan is, he was the 8th overall pick in the 2025 NFL Draft out of Arizona. 12 games played in 2024 as a 21-year-old. He had 84 receptions for 1,319 yards and 8 touchdowns in 2023. He played in 13 games. He had 90 receptions for 1,402 yards and 10 touchdowns. Now, the tale of the Carolina Panthers season last year was really a tale of two different seasons, right? We come out the gate and Bryce Young looks like absolute trash, right? Bryce Young couldn't read a children's book like his name was Floyd Mayweather trying to read Cat in the Hat, right? It just wasn't working. Things are going very bad for Bryce Young. A lot of people were shitting on me because I was a bit of a Bryce Young truther last year. I thought, you know what? They bring in the new head coach. Things are going to change for Bryce Young, and then obviously it starts off really bad. He gets benched for the Red Rifle, and then he comes back after Andy Dalton got into a car accident, and you know, one man's trash is another man's treasure, right? Sadly, Andy Dalton gets messed up in a car accident. Bada bing, bada boom, step inside the room. Bryce Young ends up actually playing quite well. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like Bryce Young has even lived up to his expectations based upon how everyone really liked him coming into the NFL draft. You know, CJ Stroud kind of overtook him as the best quarterback in that class, but we don't need Bryce Young to be Patrick fucking Mahomes for Tet McMillan to succeed. We saw last season a washed version of Deontay Johnson get hyperinflated in fantasy football drafts because of his unreal usage that we projected in this offense. The reason why we drafted Deontay Johnson wasn't necessarily because we thought that Deontay Johnson was going to be very good. It was solely because we thought that Deontay Johnson was going to get force-fed the rock. Fast forward to 2025, and the reason why I like Tet McMillan is because he's good, and I also really like him because I believe he is going to be fed the rock. We saw Adam Thielen the corpse of Adam Thielen roll out there and put up big games in the year 2024. So you better believe Ted McMillan in an offense where he's competing with Adam Thielen, Xavier, somebody touch him, I get, Jalen Cocker, David Moore, Hunter Renfrow, Jimmy Horn Jr. We believe that Ted McMillan is the clear number one option on this team. A lot of times in fantasy football, the reason why a player succeeds isn't because he's the best player on earth, right? Ted McMillan doesn't need to be Jerry Rice. He doesn't need to be Justin Jefferson. He doesn't need to be Jamar Chase. All he needs is opportunity. And I believe the opportunity will be coming heavily, like you haven't cranked off in the last couple of weeks. Shout out to Sugar Sean O'Malley, who sadly lost to Marab, and that really hurt really bad on Saturday. But Ted McMillan is going to be given a boatload of opportunity, and I don't believe that this is a boat that's going to sink like the Titanic. I believe that there's no iceberg in sight. I think Ted McMillan is going to fall ass backwards into a shit ton of volume in an offense that we saw last season has a bunch of upside. So Ted McMillan, this is a guy that should be being drafted, in my opinion, probably in like the 4th or the 5th round at least, and he's going closer to the back half of the 6th round. Don't overthink things at all when it comes to Ted McMillan. I know there's worries about Bryce Young, this, that, and the other thing, but there is a clear path to the number one amount of targets on this team. And again, we just saw Adam Thielen put up big numbers as an UNC last season in this offense. Next up, we move to the final wide receiver who could break fantasy football in 2025, and that is Calvin Ridley of the Tennessee Titans. Sleeper ADP wide receiver 37 at pick number 80, the 8th pick inside of the 7th round right now. Now, Calvin Ridley has been a guy that I have fallen for multiple times, and multiple times it has been a trap. Shout out to Admiral Akbar, right? We have, been the mouse trying to get the cheese. You're like, all right, I see the situation in Jacksonville. I really like it. Let me get the cheese, and then boom, your head is fucking split in half. Your brains are up against the wall, right? That's how it is felt to fall for Calvin Ridley. Now, I wasn't the biggest Calvin Ridley truther last year, but again, this was a situation where he was the clear number one wide receiver. There were some high highs, there were some low lows. Ultimately, though, the reason why I think Calvin Ridley didn't succeed last year was not really on his shoulders. It wasn't really because Calvin Ridley was completely washed, that Calvin Ridley was running out there and he looked like he was stuck in quicksand, like it looked like they put 50 pounds on each ankle and he was trying to move and he was just going in slow motion like he was dodging some bullets in the Matrix. No, Calvin Ridley didn't succeed because of the quarterback situation, and that is very evident when you look into the efficiency stats. Calvin Ridley, sure, I get he's no young buck anymore like he was back with the Falcons all those years ago. I get that he is getting older, but if you look at the efficiency stats, they tell the story of a wide receiver whose upside is league winning inside of the 7th round. He was 9th in explosive rating, 10th in yards per reception, 1st in unrealized air yards, which directly correlates to the fact that the quarterback situation was dog shit last year, whether it was Will Levis or whoever they ended up fucking rolling out there. He had a 5.9 target accuracy rating, 91st at the wide receiver position. So he was getting the targets, 7.1 per game, 120 targets, 18th at wide receiver. Now, the targets weren't very good, right? They were coming in bunches, but they were coming shaking his way. They were underthrown, overthrown, thrown, not even in the same vicinity as the guy, not even in the same fucking zip code. 64 receptions, 3.8 per game, 34th. 1,017 receiving yards, though, 59.8 per game, 18th, and only 5 total touchdowns, 40th at wide receiver. So again, you can look at last season, and some people are just box score watchers, right? They say, Nick, Calvin Ridley wasn't good last season because of his box score, right? And you say I had Calvin Ridley last year, Nick, he wasn't that good. And I fully fucking agree with you. He was not good in fantasy football. If you had him, you wished you didn't. You wished you picked someone else in that range where you selected Calvin Ridley. But this year, they bring in Cam Ward. Now, is Cam Ward going to be the messiah, the franchise quarterback of the Tennessee Titans? That is to be seen. right? That is to be seen over this season and over the next couple of years, right? Is Cam Ward the guy? Is he going to live up to that first pick, the numero uno pick in the NFL draft? Is he going to be that guy? We shall see. But I do believe he is miles ahead of the shit tier quarterback situation they were in last year in Tennessee. It was really bad. And again, with the other receivers on this team, they've got Treylon Burks, who never worked out. They've got Tyler Lockett, who is 1 foot into the retirement home, right? Tyler Lockett, he might be 1 3/4 foot, like just the heel of his foot might not be in the fucking front door, right? They've got Van Jefferson. They have Alec Imanor, right? They have James Prochet, right? But none of those guys are Calvin Ridley. So again, you get an upgrade at the quarterback position. You look at the efficiency stats. They tell the story that Calvin Ridley is still very good. So don't panic on Calvin Ridley. Just take him inside the 7th round because, again, this is a guy that could break fantasy football with league-winning upside if Cam Ward ends up working out. And even if Cam Ward is just halfway fucking decent, it should be a way better season out of Calvin Ridley. So thank you guys all so much for watching. If you did end up enjoying today's video, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button like it owes you some money. Leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. Follow me on Twitter if you would like. And check out one of the videos on your screen if you have not seen them already. I love you a long time. Have a great one. As always, good boy.